Welcome to the Foundry, a Flesh and Blood TCG podcast, Episode 1. My name is Gambit. Tonight we are going to start with the news from Rathe. Specifically, we are going to talk about the Calling in Indianapolis. The Calling happened last weekend, a week ago, and been going over a number of things as we move forward. There's a lot of opinions and things that have been going on. So first of all, I know that Dylan Mack gets some flack because some people think he's a great player and some people don't. He's a hard worker. I'll just put it this way. Now, this was his prediction for the Calling. 35% Starro, 15% Prism, 8% Viserai, 8% Lexi, 7% Chain, 6. Now, the Katsu number is a little high. Briar Dash, etc. You can see this was March 15th at 7:10 p.m. Now, let's pull up the actual breakdown. It's 28% Bravo. Pretty close. He had 35%, 15% Prism. Prism was actually higher. Viserai was nearly 18%, which showed that a lot of people liked his stats. And then Chain, Lexi, Katsu, and on down the line. So, not terrible. Usually plus or minus 5% is a respectable tolerance. Now, there was over 50% of your decks were the top three. This is usually a healthy metagame has 3 decks or more that are considered the top decks, and at one point in time they were each preying on each other. And so that is quite a chunk. Now, we typically don't see numbers quite that high in many other games. You'll have one deck that is clearly the best deck. Your second best deck has a decent matchup against the first place deck. And your third matchup has a great matchup versus the first place deck, but a terrible matchup against the second place deck. And so these two numbers tend to be lower most of the time. I had 10 people were on Boltons, 8 on Kano, 8 on Oldham, 7 Dash, 5 OG Bravo, 5 Doranthea, 4 Levia, 2 Azalea. Alright, so where the problem lies, let's see if I can get this to open in another window. Okay, so on day 2, there were, I remember the exact total was, of all the X and 2s was like 91 players. 42% of that was Bravo, Starvo. 25% of that was Prism. 17 was Viserai. 11 Chain. And then we had a steep drop off. 4% Lexi, 1% Briar, 1% Keno, 1% Bolton. So first of all, for the ones that ended up making day 2 with the lower tiered heroes, the Kano player, I tip my hat to you. You can do you can do dang near no wrong. That is that's some impressive stuff. And the other 6 decks, I was not surprised. Chain and Briar, I thought were a little. I thought they were closer, but apparently Chain is still better, even after the bannings. I like the Briar deck personally, but I understand. And Lexi has enough disruptive elements that it can make hay in this, so I wasn't completely surprised by that. But Star of the Show and Prism continue to overperform. Viserai, it's actually pretty cool to see that Viserai maintained about the same percentage from day 1 to day 2. Bravo Star Show went up and Prism went down slightly. Actually, no, Prism went up because she was at 20%. So, Chain went up. Some very good showings. Alright, so top 8 decks. Most of you guys have already seen these at this point in time. But there were 4 Bravo Star of the Show, 2 Prisms, 1 Chain, and 1 Briar. So you have a number of guys who were Magic players, Pheno Black, Michael Hamilton, Jacob Baugh. I know were Magic players. And of course, Matt Rogers was the number 1 ranked player in the world before this tournament. Michael Hamilton had won the previous Calling that was in Orlando. Jacob Baugh was a perennial Magic player, won an invitational for that game. Michael Hamilton was a 3-time Star City Games Invitational top 8 competitor. So there was a lot of chops in this. D. Rude or David Rude and Matt Rogers are in a similar testing group. I think David is from Canada. Matt, of course, is from Australia. No, maybe New Zealand. Anyway, we weren't surprised to see Starvo or Prism. The Chain and the Briar were pleasantly surprised. Again, we didn't see any Viserai here, which was kind of sad. He's got so many tools. And of course, this is our top 8 picture. Alright, interesting stat of the day was from Nick Miller. Of course, Nick, unfortunately, could not be at the event because his wife, significant other, was giving birth, and he couldn't make it. But he threw out this juicy stat. Matt Rogers, 6th top 8. Michael Hamilton, 3rd top 8. First for everybody else. Jacob Baugh made top 8 in U.S. Nationals. So that's, a pretty juicy stat. Obviously, anybody who has played competitive Magic to the level of what Michael Hamilton, Jacob Ball has done, we're not surprised to see that they can do this. Matt has been doing has been doing this in big events since the game started. All right, I want to bring up notable finishes. Of course, Brendan from Arsenal Pass ended up finishing 12th. He lost his winning in against D-Rude. See if I can open this window a little bigger. I'll go over the names that I know. Nathan Crawford is from the Card Guys. They're a team in the Georgia area. In the same group with Nam Vo, who won a Calling with Sebastian, who finished second with Chain at to Tyler Horsepool at the Calling Las Vegas. So they've got some powerful players in that group. Of course, Brendan finished 12th. Let's see. James Kanzokia. So James is a world champion in an old card game known as WWE Raw Deal. He is also a 2012 World of Warcraft TCG world champion, or top 4 competitor in the World Championships. So he's no slouch in card games. Rob Seigel, who's from Talarian Dropouts, also tests with Tarek Patel, 24th. There's Tyler Horsepool, was 26th. So I want to do a special shout out to the 27th place finisher, Edward Knight. Edward is a player from the Huntsville, Alabama area, which is about 50 miles south of here. Ed played Chain, and he's probably one of the few people that could boast this. So in the event, he defeated Tarek Patel, current U.S. national champion, Matt Rogers, at the time the number 1 world ranked player in the world, and Michael Hamilton in this event. So let's say he was slinging some Slayer vibes. So I want to give a special shout out to him. Don't know that I can see anybody else on that particular list. Let's see. Yeah, I didn't know if I'd see anybody else here that I missed in the other one. And of course, the winner, if you did know, was Michael Hamilton. Michael's build of Starvo was much different than most other builds that I had seen. He has done during the wrap up, he talked about the fact that he was not running any Awakenings in his deck. He had built more of a defensive build of Starvo that did him well, particularly in a matchup against Chain in both the round robin and as well as his top 4 matchup against the same player, no less, where basically he was able to fatigue out the Chain player, and if he was playing the more aggressive builds that were mostly what you saw around the tables, he would not have been able to take that strategy. So best matches at the event. Obviously, I've got the semifinal and final grand final highlighted here. You're going to find that link in the description below. And I also want to shout out the SCG coverage team. We had Matt DeMarco, a.k.a. Flake, from the Instant Speed podcast, filling in for Craig Krempels, who sadly ended up catching COVID and was unable to attend. The Tan and Grace, go Braves, and Brian Gottlieb. They did fantastic throughout the weekend. Obviously, Matt DeMarco had never worked with either Tannen or Brian before, while Craig Krempels had. So it was very seamless. There was a lot of, there were a few things missed. Don't get me wrong. Nobody can be perfect. I have done that type of work before. You can't be perfect. I don't care how well it is, but they were definitely entertaining, and they definitely tried to get the most insight that they could. And of course, a shout out to Craig Krempels and Nick Miller. Obviously, both of those folks could not be there for whatever, for their particular reasons. The Battle Hardened. So the Battle Hardened was, of course, on Sunday when the top 8 was going on. So Tariq Patel met this young 15-year-old from St. Louis who made the top 8 of the Battle Hardened on Sunday. And I'm going to let you guys watch the interview. I'm going to put the link in the description. But I watched the 45-second interview that he had with him, and was asking questions and everything. If Tariq Patel thinks the kid's going to be a star, I would be inclined to agree. So, watch out for this young 15-year-old. We also got Matt Dilks, who also top 8'd. Matt was a former Magic player as well. He was grinding hard in the event. I don't remember if he was in Viserai or Chain, but he was he's done well so far. And then we have, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Yongji Yang, who won the Battle Hardened event. If I remember correctly, he was also playing Starvo, but he got a gold cold foil stalagmite, which is kind of hilarious. All right, so on to the product news. So obviously we have had news about the classic battle 2-player deck. is coming out. Well, it does say on the box that there are going to be mentors in here, and so this was a spoiler that came out. Want to say the original spoiler was on it's either ICV2 or another website. But this is another mentor for Warrior. Of course, we have one currently for Sir Bolton. In the Sir Bolton deck. This one will be in the Dorinthia, the new Dorinthia deck. Hala Goldhelm. Hala is face down in your arsenal to start a turn. You may turn her face up. If she's face up, whenever a sword attack you control hits, it gains go again and put a lesson counter on Hala. Then if you have 2 or more lesson counters on Hala, banish her, search your deck for Glistening Steel Blade, put it face up in your arsenal, and shuffle. Blocks for 3. So this obviously confirms that Glistening Steel Blade is the Dorinthia specialization that's in the starter, which we didn't have a full name before, so kudos to that. So also, earlier in the week, we got an article about Fab and Dragon Shield doing an official partnership for new sleeves. And doesn't talk a lot about it in this announcement, but it says 4 of the most iconic Flesh and Blood heroes will feature on the first wave of sleeves, available worldwide April 22nd at your local game store. And in the What's the Latest article, which I believe came out the day after, we got Skirmish Season. These are beautiful, by the way. Comprehensive rules kicked in. Here we go. So the first 4 are Oldham, Lexi, Chain, and Prism, which they picked 4 currently very good heroes. All 4 of these are playable either in Blitz or Classic Constructed, and most of this group is very competitive in those formats. Now, I personally hope that we get more than just the heroes, because artwork like Sonata Arcanics or some of the Heralds or some of the burn spells in Kano, there's so many good pieces of artwork in this game. So those are the first 4. Now, just a couple of days ago, when Fab released their the players that were qualified for Pro Tour 1 in New Jersey, they also gave a little spoiler. I'm just going to scroll down to the one that's the largest, because so anyone who participates in any of the events at Pro Tour 1, the Battle Hardened, the Calling, the side events, or the main event, is going to get a cold foil copy of this hero. Apparently, This is the only place to get this hero. At least that is our understanding as of currently. So this is Yorick, Weaver of Tales, 4 intellect, 20 health, Bard hero, young. Shenanigans are fixing to ensue, folks. At the start of the game, all heroes shuffle their starting decks together. All heroes share the same deck and graveyard this game. Now, I don't know about you. This sounds like a card that they have specifically designed for one of their fun non-tournament legal events like the multiplayer Ultimate Pitch Fight games. Because it makes no dang sense. But it's hilarious as all get out. I knew we'd get a Bard at some point. And this ability is funny as all get out. Alright, enough about that. Alright. So now we're going to talk about, this is going to be my editorial. So, this is a balanced format, but is it a healthy one? Currently, there are many players that are there are many players that are having discussions on if the current format is a healthy one. My first exhibit is from was a Twitter Spaces conversation that happened that was hosted by Brendan Patrick of Arsenal Pass and Tarek Patel. And they discussed it with members of Twitter involving the current format. Again, this is another one of these that that I will link in the description below. I will let you listen to the conversation. There were a lot of questions asked back and forth between members of the audience, as well as many other top players that were in the group as well. There was they definitely have some good points in here. Rather than skewing your perspective of what they said, a lot of it was, more or less, if they ban something from Starvo, or they they change the ability on Starvo, or if they ban something like Awakening, or change some sort of rule about it, then Prism gets moved up in the metagame, but Prism still has some matchups that it doesn't like that Starvo was keeping in check. And there's a lot of people that felt like that Viserai would be the next one that would get hit. Obviously, that causes a huge chain reaction of things. A lot of folks think, well, let Starvo play itself out. If you're going to do something, early Living Legend is what they were talking about. I'm going to discuss those ideas in a minute, but that's to give you a gist. The next one involves a couple of fellows from Team Covenant. which is Steven and Zach Bunn. They have a similar discussion on Twitch. They normally, Twitch and or YouTube, they do their recording on Tuesdays when they talk about and or playtest Flesh and Blood. There's a lot of questions about whether the format itself is fun. And because there's some talk that some of the other two formats, the previous ones with Chain, when he had a stranglehold on the format, and then Cheerios Briar, that the format was more fun with those two decks in the format individually. Again, this is something I'm going to get to here shortly. So the whole conversation that we're getting to is what happens on April the 5th. So April the 5th is the scheduled ban and restricted date. I don't know if it seeing if I could find the page where it says yeah, card legalities. I'm going to leave the leaderboard up here. See if I can get another zoom in here. So, the question is, what's going to happen on April the 5th? Now, LSS has a number of things that they could do. They could do nothing and leave everything alone. No bans, no changes. Starvo is at 814 points. If he wins the Pro Tour, let's see. If he wins the Pro Tour, it's 200 points. It's automatic. He's immediately hits living legend status. But we have to deal with him until the release of the next set, which is I believe June is the release date for the standalone set this year. The battle hardened events are 30 points apiece. It would take more of those to get rid of him, and the calling is just 100 points. So you would have to, he'd have to win 2 callings. Prism is at 560, which means it's going to take more to get rid of her from the format. Vizorai's way down here. I mean, he's at 6th, but still, there's quite a bit there. So if we do nothing, we leave him a living legend. If we decide that we need to hit Starvo, the first thing is to errata Starvo's ability. That ability is, easier to proc than originally thought. And so the option of getting all 3 abilities, go again, dominate, and +2 is too good. So errating him to only give one of those 3 probably lowers it where he's still playable, but not nearly as strong as before. You could errata the pulses. A lot of the times, pulses are held in hand as they hit 2 of the 3 elements. So they currently that's what they hit. You could errata that when revealed, or particularly when you're talking about either fusing or his ability, you have to show 3 different or 2 different cards. You can't just have the one in hand to fuse. That would be a rulebook change or a comprehensive rules change. That could lessen his power because they're playing all 3 pulses. There's a lot of talk about banning and or restricting Awakening. Up until this weekend, I could have seen an argument to banning and or restricting Awakening. The problem is, as we know now, Michael Hamilton did not run Awakening in his deck at all or sideboard. He played a purely defensive-based deck and used the fuse or the Yahtzee, the bingo ability, slot machine, whatever you want to call it, for Starvo's ability as just a powerful way to get damage through and disrupt my opponent's game plan. So I don't know if this one's on the table anymore. Also, banning and or restricting Awakening also severely hurts Oldhim in games where you're not drawing your defensive cards. Now, granted, it does do a lot for making your opponent's version of the deck of Starvo much, I guess, more predictable, because when you were running Awakening, you didn't have to block much. When you did decide to block, you had equipment that you could use, and you could easily swing black and gain control back from your aggro, your opponent being aggro. Obviously, and then the last one, which is something that is talked about in both the Twitch stream and the Twitter Spaces, which is early living Legend Starro. Now, there's drawbacks to doing any of that. Obviously, it makes the 2 decks below it that we're going to talk about more powerful. Prism, there is a, now I've only got Luminaris there, but let me go to, if I could type, let's see. So, problem A, number one, in my opinion, is Luminars. Luminars basically gives all your auras one attack and go again if you have a yellow card in your pit zone. Well, Prism's ability is pay 2, banish a card from soul, make a soul shield. Which basically reads, discard a yellow from my hand at instant speed, banish a card from soul, make another soul shield to attack you with. Then I get to attack you with all mine. I honestly believe that Luminars itself is too powerful. You should have to be like dang near every other hero in the game and actually have to pay something to attack. Yes, Raiden does not have an attack cost. But its attack of 0, unless you actually do something, means that they can get away with that. I don't think they can with Luminars. And this would severely turn down Prism's ability, as playing against auras is a very difficult battle. Now the other cards that you can would need to be looked at is Merciful Retribution and Ode to Wrath. Now, Merciful Retribution is sort of the painful one, because every time your opponent pops a Herald or pops an aura, they're going to take a damage. And then if Ode to Wrath's on the table, then they're going to lose another life. These two snowball out of control very quickly, even if they're hitting you and you've got, 3 or 4 soul shields. So, there's the options with Prism. Believe me, making them use Iris of Reality would definitely force a change in the way the deck was built. Although I still think that card is good, it just forces them to play and build differently. Luminars is just so good, is the problem. Now, the talk about Viserai. So let's talk about Viserai. All the Ruin Blades got some ridiculous tools in Everfest. Let's see. Yep. Vexing Quillhand gives them 2 free Rune Chants. Go again. They can use Arcane Barrier if they have it. It's more for combo decks and combo turns. Runic Reclamation can destroy auras and give you Rune Chant tokens. Swarming Gloomveil is ridiculous in all 3 Ruin Blade decks, because they all have ways to create auras. Revel in Ruin Blade, even though there is a restriction on the card that you don't get the Rune Chance unless you played an attack and a non-attack this turn, you're trying to set up those turns anyway, because particularly that's what Viserai wants to do, but you can do that in any of them. The incantations are pretty good. I haven't seen Drowning Dire used much. Reek of Corruption is another card that procs off auras, forces more discard, and Shrill of Skullform is the Stone Cold Nuts in all three decks, because you know how easy it is to create an aura in all three of those. So there is definitely some power. Viserai is definitely raised in power. All three of the Rune Blades are powerful. So I guess there's some talk that Viserai may, if they take Starvo down a peg by doing something, that they're going to have to do something with Viserai. So if that's the case, the biggest thing that's been talked about is lessening the OTK or one turn kill effect of building up rune chance. So for example, they could ban Bloodsheath Skeleton. It does do some unfair things. It also blocks for 2 the first time. You're usually not blocking the second time with it because you want to use it. Typically where it does the unfair things is Sonata Arcanics. When you build up a bunch of rune chants, you can pop the Skeletta or the Skeletta, play a Sonata Arcanics, typically for free. You get to see so many cards. Typically when you're popping it, it's for 6 or more. Well, if you got 6 or more rune chants, it's going to be the you're going to see 6 cards, X, and plus 3. You have 6, which is 3 and 3 for 6, and then you just see 3 additional for the ability. When you're doing OTK turns, you're seeing 9, 10 cards, something of that nature. And if you get a split of 5 and 5, it's 5 arcane, you draw 5 cards, you shuffle the rest of the cards in your deck, and then you have a massive turn. So there was some talk about potentially errating Skeletta, that there's a max that can reduce the cost by. Now I can tell you from playing as many card games as I have, a card that reduces costs or makes cost 0 resources typically have functioning issues, and so that's where Skeletta comes in, because you can do some ridiculous things with it. The other suggestion was to ban Sonata Arcanics. Arcanics is a fair card if you're having to actually pay resources for it, or play it for 0 where you only get to flip 3 cards. You're basically playing 1 card to draw at most 1 card and deal 1 arcane damage. It is when it's paired with Skeletta and a bazillion rune chants. There was a suggestion on one of those 2 streams that I talked about that I think was a fantastic idea, which is instead of being able to build up rune chants, have rune chants pop at the end of turn. And if you're going to go for designing cards like Revel in Ruined Blood, where you're forced to use them that turn or they pop, that could fix a lot of the power level issues there. All right. So what is the point of this editorial? Whoops. So the point is that we have had 3 consecutive formats that have had issues of one form or another. Monarch with Chain, Tales of Aria with Briar, and now Everfest with Starvo. So, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So, players are starting to see a pattern, and they will quickly begin to lose interest if things continue to have repeated issues. Now, my guess in this design phase is that LSS took the time to develop the lore, to develop the mechanics, the rule system, and really take the time to design Welcome to Rathe, Arcane Rising, and Crucible. But the last 3 sets, Monarch, Tales of Aria, and Everfest, have all had issues. And they didn't necessarily understand the issues that they caused with Monarch by reducing the cost of Riftbind and Seeds to their costs of 1 and 0. They completely whiffed on Duskblade because it was a late card design. Plunder Run was not, in my opinion, was not templated properly. And that is a card and a design where it should have been designed to read your next attack action. If your next attack action hits, draw a card. And I think all cards should be formatted that way because that forces your opponent to block the next attack, and then they don't have to worry about further ones down the chain drawing them cards. But because it was not worded that way, and Electrify's the same way, they're going to be templating issues in the future because those cards are going to be too powerful. So LSS had not had time to change their design philosophies after the Monarch issue to fix anything in Tales or Everfest. If anything, there might have been time to look back over this next standalone set in the summer. If that is the case, and they were able to correct that, then maybe these 3 sets are a blip on the radar. But if that's not the case, we need to ask the question, is it time for LSS to hire a set of outside beta testers to vet their classic constructed format before a set heads to print? Game designers there are a lot of inner working pieces that they have to look through. And they have some great ideas that are great on paper. But when you take them into practical applications, you honestly need a larger sampling size before you say, we may have messed this up. And it's better, in my opinion, to get that before the set goes to print than after. We're not a video game company. We can't make those changes on the fly. Also, it's never going to be 100%, right? So, be aware. We're excited about what we see. We're excited to see what comes next. But know that there is a little bit of worry because this has now happened in 3 consecutive sets. As always, I offer my services. I have beta tested a number of games previously, and I enjoy trying to break cards and provide use cases that says this is the right way to design something and this is the wrong way to design something. Because if I can break it, I know you can break it. That's all for this newscast. For all the news, rumors, spoilers, and opinions, in the world of Rathe, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you are informed when new videos are live. Until next time, this is Gambit from the Foundry, signing off.